don't say I'm a lawyer and I always have to have, so I don't forget anything.
As loud as you can.
Last year I spoke right after July 22nd, which was the date that my client, Grant Williams, was exonerated of a murder in Staten Island, for which he spent 23 years in prison. It was quite an experience. It took about 6 years.
You have to yell.
Really yell. Doesn't carry.
It took about.
There you go.
That's
That's
good.
good.
You got it.
You can do it.
Think Ethel Merman.
Usually I'm in front of a jury that's about 5 feet away. And even then they say I'm too loud.
It's outdoors.
It took about 6 years of effort, and some of you may have heard this last year or not, I'm not sure, but I figured I'd give a little recap because I'm updating it today to let you know about what happened afterwards, after he was exonerated, and the compensation, how that came about. This is about the 15th case that I've had over the years of people who have been unjustly convicted and were exonerated. This case took about 6 years. After investigating it for 3 or 4 years, coming up with about 15 witnesses, I turned it over to the district attorney of Staten Island. And of course, this happened in 1993, so it's a new district attorney, and it's a lot better than the ones that have been there. And they agreed to reinvestigate the case themselves because they have the wherewithal to do things that I can't do. And it took about another two and a half years. COVID got in the way. And in the end, they totally agreed that he was actually innocent, and it was the first time in the history of Staten Island that they ever had done something like this before. And as a result of that, the woman that ran this became the head of what we call the Conviction Integrity Unit. And a lot of district attorney's offices in New York and around the country have established conviction integrity units to examine old convictions where there seems to be a good chance that the person is actually innocent. But just to recap a little bit, for those who weren't here and don't remember, about 5 o'clock in the afternoon on a day, a guy came out of a bodega with a paper bag, went up to some guy on the street, took a gun out of the paper bag and shot and killed the guy, and then he ran away. A police officer, the 2 officers who happened to be nearby for another reason, one a male and a female, the male started chasing him and the guy got away. He radioed back to his team that the description of the guy, 5'5", heavy-set black man. Grant Williams, my client, who was eventually convicted, is 6'1" and thin. Looked nothing like the man at all. But what happened was that one witness who was riding in a car claimed to have seen what happened. He happened to be white, and looked at photos of a mug because my client had some kind of a and identified him. By the time the officer spoke to the detectives that night, he now had an excuse why he had said originally that the guy was 5'5" and heavy set. The critical thing about the case is that the killer wore a cap with the logo of the Wu-Tang Clan on it. Now, I don't know how many of you know about the Wu-Tang Clan, but it is one of the internationally known hip-hop groups, and even back then was well known. My client worked with the Wu-Tang Clan. So that cap became the reason why my client was convicted, but that cap should have been the reason why he was exonerated, which happened years later. The case went to trial. The district attorney's argument was the witness who saw him, it's been corroborated because the cop said the guy was wearing a Wu-Tang Clan cap. My client worked with the Wu-Tang Clan, therefore case closed. I got the case 17 years later. It's hard to believe how these things happen. turned out that in any event, eventually the district attorney exonerated, and it turned out that there were tons of witnesses that were never looked at by the detectives at all. Once they had the identification, and the New York Times article said 4 hours after the murder it was solved, right? And they stopped working, and they stopped listening to any evidence that would contradict that, any exculpatory evidence. Even a witness who they had spoken to that very night went to his home, who was with the deceased when he got killed, knew my client, and said it wasn't him. Totally ignored, never investigated again. Anyway, last July 22nd, he was exonerated. He had been on parole because we were able to get him out on parole after significant evidence had come to light that he was most likely innocent. In order to get compensation...
Wait, you forgot the cap.
No, I didn't. Oh. My,
Peripheral brain, I remember.
work alone. Now I say that line because Margot's father, my wife, for 54 years, just the other day, his father was an actor and a comedian. And whenever he got heckled by somebody, he would say, I work alone. John knows because John's in our family. So very well. So now I use some of his lines, even summing up to a jury. And I can tell a joke, and then he'll say, here's another one you won't like. Anyway, thanks for reminding me. Yes, so the cap obviously was the critical thing. After he was convicted, and the case was still on appeal, his appeals lawyer received a phone call from Grant from prison. Grant said, I'm not the guy, have that cap analyzed for DNA evidence. Now who's going to do that if they're guilty, right? Okay. So his appeals lawyer makes a motion to the judge to have the cap analyzed for DNA. Remember, this is like 1995. Okay, it's not as good a science back then. The district attorney's response to that motion was, oh, the New York Police Department destroyed the cap. What a coincidence. What my client told me years later was that that phone call that he made from prison, they recorded. So it seemed to me that it was very coincidental that 3 weeks after that phone conversation, which my client told his lawyer to have it analyzed, the cap was destroyed. While the case is on appeal. So if there's a new trial is ordered, there's no evidence. Where's the evidence is gone? Anyway, so that was just one of the factors, obviously. As far as compensation is concerned, well, let me tell you about my client. He is an amazing person. He never lost his confidence. Never lost what he needed to carry on in prison all those years. And he would tell his fellow inmates, I'm innocent. Yeah, right, we hear that. Yeah, everybody says that. He says, no, one day I'm going to be on television and you're going to see. And in fact, that's what happened. On July 22nd of last year, in front of the Staten Island courthouse, there was a big press conference with the press and everything. And he got up in there and he said exactly what I just told you. And there it is, the truth. See, I'm here. I'm telling you now. He met a woman. He has a baby. He's doing everything he possibly can to get back to a life. He has been 23 to about 46 and 47 years of his life. But he has the wherewithal because he wants to help others in a similar situation. And the wherewithal is coming because we managed to settle 2 cases to get him compensation. One type of claim is against the state of New York, where they'll compensate you if you can prove by clear and convincing evidence that you are actually innocent, not that the conviction was overturned on other grounds. And of course, that was pretty much of a slam dunk because the district attorney agreed that he was innocent. And by the way, we know who the killer was. Everybody knows who the killer was now. They interviewed him in the end, and of course he said, I don't know what you're talking about. 25 years later, it's too late to prosecute. So that was a little easier to settle. The other type of settlement came from the city of New York, who showed that his constitutional rights were violated. And of course we have this destruction of the cat, we have the cop who lied and said it was after saying it was so and so. And I must say, the city of New York allowed us to talk settlement without even bringing a lawsuit. So we went directly to the city controller's office, which came to They looked at the case for 3 or 4 months, and within 9 or 10 months of the exoneration, both cases were settled. So now he has the funds that he used, and he's back working with the Wu-Tang Clan. He's a road manager. You can draw your own conclusions as to how these things happen. In this particular case, apart from the obvious racism that's involved, it was also the connection to the hip-hop community. And it's not the first case I've had with hip-hop artists. Especially back then, in what they called the gangster rap stuff, you know, it was horrible. It was horrible. So that's all they cared about, getting this solved and getting it over with, even though they really knew they had it. Anyway.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you have any questions,
Thank you for your work.